Judge Amy Coney Barrett is now officially the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, and it could change the country's highest court for years to come. If approved, she would solidify the conservative majority on the court, potentially making it a 6-3 and putting many landmark decisions back in play. For more on this, I want to bring in Ilya Shapiro. He's the director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute, and he's also the author of Supreme Disorder. Ilya, it's great to have you with us. So how significant is this pick?
It's a big deal. Anytime the court shifts significantly from one jurisprudential philosophy to another, there's a lot of focus on that. For example, Clarence Thomas replaced Thurgood Marshall, very liberal to a very conservative. This is a similar kind of shift. And of course, the timing coming 6 weeks before the election is also big. Amy Coney Barrett is widely respected, universally respected for both her legal acumen, her teaching, her thoughtfulness, her grace, and you saw a bit of that in this announcement. So both in terms of her as a potentially very strong, long-time justice, if she's confirmed, she's 48, could serve on the court for a long time, and the seriousness of purpose with which she has approached both her academic writings and now for 3 years her judicial writings means that she will be a force on the court and, as you've been discussing, would mean that the middle of the court is no longer Chief Justice John Roberts, but depending on the issue, maybe Brett Kavanaugh, maybe Neil Gorsuch, maybe she herself, and that would really be a different dynamic.
I have heard from so many people who know her that have discussed her intellect and her character, but she is also known for her conservative views, her anti-abortion personal position. Would her confirmation potentially mean that Roe versus Wade could be overturned, or that in some other areas access to abortions might be limited?
Well, Roe and Casey, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, of course, is the governing law about abortion, the 1992 case. I don't know if there's more than 1 or 2 votes on the court to overturn them altogether. What we could see in this area is that regulations and restrictions which otherwise have been invalidated, including this past term, a case out of Louisiana where John Roberts cast the deciding vote to overturn a regulation, those on the margins would be upheld. So there would be more wiggle room for restrictions and kind of more of a federal system, so different states could have put in different policies. But of course, recall, even if there were eventually, years down the road, enough votes to overturn Roe versus Wade, that would just turn that decision back to the states.
Well, the court is scheduled to hear arguments over the Affordable Care Act a week after Election Day. I know that in 2017, Judge Barrett criticized Chief Justice Roberts on his decision that ended up preserving Obamacare. How might her being confirmed on the bench affect the Affordable Care Act?
Well, to be clear, I myself have written plenty criticizing John Roberts' opinion in that case, but this is a different case this time around than what we faced 8 years ago. In the intervening years, Congress zeroed out the penalty, tax, whatever you want to call it, that one had to pay for not purchasing complying insurance, and therefore, presumably now, Chief Justice Roberts' saving construction is no longer applicable. But the real question is how much of the rest of the law has to fall. And since when Congress changed or zeroed out that tax penalty, it didn't change any of the rest of the law. It's a tougher row to hoe, a tougher argument to make. This idea of what lawyers call severability, how much of the law is severable from the unconstitutional, presumably now, mandate. And there's a big dispute over that. I find it hard to believe that the entirety of the ACA of Obamacare would fall, but certain related provisions may be in jeopardy, at least with respect to the private market. You could still have exchanges, state exchanges or federal exchanges, where the regulations apply. But it's an interesting debate, and it's not even clear whether Amy Coney Barrett, if confirmed, would be the 5th vote to do that. I think the court will strive to have a closer, a narrower vote with more justices. And on severability on this issue, it's not clear that this is a left versus right clean split.
And I think I think you make a very fair point that there's going to be a lot of things that are not necessarily a very clear right versus left decision. So what other issues are you watching that could come into play if Barrett is confirmed as a justice?
Well, affirmative action or the use of racial preferences in education admissions or employment. Already with Brett Kavanaugh replacing Anthony Kennedy, one would expect there to be 5 votes to cut back or eliminate the ability of governments to use race. As John Roberts himself, no swing vote on this issue, has written, the way to stop racial discrimination is to stop discriminating based on race. And while Judge Barrett doesn't have a record, either academic or judicial, in this area, you would think that whether it's the Harvard case that's currently pending before the First Circuit or other circumstances, that the affirmative action jurisprudence would change. But religious liberty, administrative law, how much deference to give to government agencies, anything that you think about in the last number of years has come down 5-4, whether in a more liberal or in a more conservative direction, that does have the potential to shift. And with John Roberts no longer being the median vote, perhaps he no longer has to think about his strategery, as you could say, in terms of thinking not about what law to apply, but how to position the court and make it seem less partisan or more legitimate in his views, if indeed that's what he's been doing tactically. So as Justice White used to say, every justice makes for a new court. And that's not simply a matter of the vote count. It's also their internal dynamics, who can convince others more, who can be a strong intellectual voice in different areas of law. And I think Judge Barrett is poised, if she becomes justice, to become an intellectual leader on the court, not just one more vote in a particular direction.
Ilya, you wrote the book, Supreme Disorder, talking about how the way that we confirm justices has completely changed in this country. And Amy Coney Barrett actually spoke to CBSN here in an interview in 2016 following the death of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. I want to play for our viewers what she had to say about the question of replacing justices during an election year.
Kennedy is a moderate Republican, and he replaced a moderate Republican, Powell. We're talking about Justice Scalia, the staunchest conservative on the court, and we're talking about him being replaced by someone who could dramatically flip the balance of power on the court. It's not a lateral move. And finally, the reality is we live in a different time. Confirmation hearings have gotten far more contentious. And so I just don't think we live in the same kind of time. So I think in some, the president has the power to nominate and the Senate has the power to act or not, and I don't think either one of them can claim that there's a rule governing one way or the other.
Those comments are so interesting now, and in many ways echoing much of what you said in terms of changing the balance of power on the court. I'm wondering, Ilya, if you could tell us a little bit more about how those comments ring to you now and what type of confirmation battles lie ahead for her.
Well, I think she's right, Lana. As you heard, she said that the president has the power to nominate and the Senate has the power to act or not. I mean, it turns out, as I found out in writing this book, Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominations, and the Politics of America's Highest Court, politics has been part of the process from the very beginning. George Washington had a nominee rejected. About half the presidents have had trouble filling seats of one kind or another. The biggest statistical tell is whether the president's party also controls the Senate. During times of united government, nominees are confirmed at about a 90% rate. When it's divided party control, it's under 60%. And that difference is accentuated even more for vacancies arising during presidential election years. That's happened 29 times. This is the 30th. When during united government, 17 of the 19 times someone has been confirmed. During the divided government in those presidential election years, only 1 of 10. Again, so this is not any sort of rule, but that's just the bare politics of the matter. And it's about counting votes. It doesn't mean that so close to an election, Mitch McConnell is absolutely right to do what he's doing, or that he's was absolutely wrong to do what he was doing 4 years ago. It's just a matter of this is a political process. And presidents and senates are elected in part based on the kinds of justices that they intend to nominate and confirm or reject.
It definitely is a political process, but it is interesting hearing some of those ideological arguments that were being used to justify blocking Supreme Court nominee Supreme Court nominee Merrick Garland at the time, now being cast aside in favor of the brutal truth, which is this is political. President Trump has had 3 nominees in less than 4 years. Can you talk to us about how impactful it is and how this compares with other presidents?
Yeah, I mean, I think a president has few powers, certainly in the domestic sphere, more important than appointing justices. These people go on to serve for decades, long after the president who appointed them has departed the White House, serving as a bridge of that, or an extension of that legal policy agenda. Justice Scalia served nearly 30 years as President Reagan's bridge to the 21st century. And that goes as much or more for the lower courts, which decide 50 or 60,000 cases a year, even as the Supreme Court decides fewer and fewer. So I would argue that this, not just the Supreme Court, although this 3rd nomination is certainly part of that, but the lower court success that he's had confirming nominees is probably the administration's biggest success. The circuit judges, the level just below the Supreme Court, he's had confirmed more than anyone other than Jimmy Carter, who did not have any Supreme Court vacancies. And as a consolation, the Congress created new judgeships for him to fill. But yeah, so that's an example. We've had presidents that haven't had an opportunity to appoint any. On the other hand, William Howard Taft had 5 nominees in a little over a year and a half. So 3 in 1 term is a big deal. Eventually, it evens out. Perhaps in a 2-term presidency, if President Trump is reelected, he might not get any more. But this impact is significant, and whether lower court or especially the Supreme Court, the federal judiciary is powerful and is different than a tax reform bill or other legislation that can be repealed, or guidance that's not worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah. One last question, Ilya, before I let you go. President Trump has said that it is important that the new justice is confirmed before the election because of the possibility of election challenges ending up in the Supreme Court. Is that self-interested? And fundamentally, what would happen if the court splits 4-4 on election issues?
Well, I wish he wouldn't put it that way, because it puts Judge Barrett in an awkward position, regardless of how she would eventually rule.
Well, sorry, Ilya, I would say that the president, sorry, Ilya, I respectfully praise the character and intellect of the nominee, but the president is the one who has phrased it that way. It was President Trump.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's right. Unfortunate that he said that. I wasn't saying that you said it that way. You were quoting him. Okay. I'm saying it's unfortunate that he put it that way. It puts Judge Barrett in that awkward position. But it is very possible. I mean, it's possible that already there are appeals from some state court decisions that are the Republican Party is asking the court to decide even before the election. But there could be challenges from key swing states if it comes down to 1 or 2 of those Midwestern states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, whose electoral votes are in play, and there's some big challenge that could get to the court. If it's 4-4, that's no constitutional crisis. It simply means that the decision of the court below stands. So from Pennsylvania, for example, that's the 3rd Circuit. Would the loser of that kind of a decision see that as less legitimate than, say, losing 5-4 before the Supreme Court? I don't know, but certainly we do have the legal process in place. It's not a matter of that this goes somehow into empty air and nobody makes that decision.
It is going to be very interesting ahead of us, and I appreciate Ilya Shapiro you coming on to discuss it. Thank you.
My pleasure, Lana.